And I'm going to hand the stage to Lewis from Magnetar IT.
Thank you very much, Hannah. So Lord Kelvin was a fantastic mathematician and scientist from the 1900s. Now, what he told us was, if you cannot measure it, you cannot improve it. And that's basically been paraphrased a little bit. What he actually says, a little bit more archaic, far more long-winded, but the essence of that stands true today, which is why I want to talk to you about how to test and measure everything that matters within your business so that you can make better decisions. And the way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to talk about the plan. How do we plan? What are we looking at? After we've discussed this, we're going to look at the how. So what tools do we need in place for this to happen automatically for you? And then finally, we're going to look at how we review and iterate this time after time. And the reason it's kind of a circle behind me, as you can see, it's for a reason. This process should not be a one-time hit. It should be forever moving and improving. And we always start with the same 7 questions when we go into businesses. We start trying to flesh out the information from the business owners. As most of you have just said, some of you have just said, you look at everything, but you don't really know if that's the right thing to be doing. So we start with asking, what exactly do you want to find out? And we start quite broad with this question, because what we don't want is the paralysis by analysis that you can inevitably get when you start looking at the minutiae of detail straight away. And then once we've got that broad idea, we can zoom in and focus on specific areas. And once we've done this, we then start to look at, well, where's all my data going to come from? What system do I have today? And this is going to flag gaps in your business where actually we don't have a way of tracking. And as Mikey mentioned, we can't track absolutely everything, but there's things that can be tracked that aren't being tracked. So this question helps pull out those bits of information early on in our questioning journey, in our discovery journey. And then once we've figured out where we're going to get this data, how do we know it's of high quality? How do we know we can trust that data to ultimately make decisions in our business based on that data? And one of the things we try to look at is how can we remove the human element from it? How can we make sure this is captured in an automated fashion or a controlled method so that the data is accurate? And one kind of horror story we had when we worked with a client recently, prior to working with us, 6 months prior to working with us, they'd been using Google Analytics on their website and tracking the bounce rate, which is quite common for people to do. Now, the problem they had is they'd set up the website wrong, so it was dual tagging, which meant the bounce rate was incorrect, and then they were targeting their marketing budget based on this bad data. So it's really important that although you might have a data source where you've got information, you've got to question, how do I know how accurate that is? And then we're going to look at, well, which business KPIs shall we use? So if we've got a broad idea at the very beginning, we want to narrow that down to actually, what are the key, what's the most meaningful information to start with? And one question you might ask is this actionable data? Can I do something if this value changes, if something happens here? And we're not just tracking vanity metrics. And this is quite common when you start looking at social media. You might be tempted to focus on impressions because the impressions look great as that number shoots up to the thousands because you got a few shares. But does it actually change anything? And are you just wasting your time? So this first part is all around focusing on the most important actionable bits of information. And then we're going to focus on the software we need to use to get this. Now, understanding the software that you need to have to do this, it's important to start at the lower level, just at the metrics. What is the data I really care about? Where do those numbers need to come from? And then you work backwards. At this point is another stage where you're going to identify gaps within your business where you might need additional tooling. You might spot issues with tracking certain information. A common one we find is most people will track the sources of their leads, and the sources may be networking, and the networking may be very specific. It might say it's from Uno networking. However, what doesn't really get tracked too much is how many networking events had to be attended before we got those leads from networking, which then leads to the conversion, and what was the actual sale value. And this is a really important metric, because if you think about it from a cold calling point of view, you wouldn't track cold calls just from phone calls that were answered. You're going to track it from how many calls are made, to how many answered, to how many decision makers, to how many actual meetings you've got booked. Then we're going to look at how we make this visual. So the types of information that you're going to be gathering, it's so important to understand that the numbers are great, but the numbers don't really help you understand it. If you're looking at 2 years worth of data, it's not really that helpful. So when we start looking at the visuals, we map the type of metric you're after to a type of visual. And what do I mean by visual? Well, it could be a line chart, a pie chart. It could be a gauge, which is really good for if you're looking at sales targets. It's always quite motivational, we find, with people. And alternatively, it might be a map. You might be really interested about the geographical, maybe where the sales are coming from, maybe where your website traffic is coming from. So that can then help you make decisions later on about where to refocus potentially marketing budget. And it's also really important at this point because you can spot trends and patterns when you've got really nice visuals to tell that story to you. And finally, we're going to think about who are the people who are actually going to be viewing this data. So we've got the stakeholders, basically, what we'd call them. So you've got the directors, the owners of the business, but then you've got the individual technical towers, let's call them, in the business units. So your sales, your marketing, your finance, and your operations areas. Now, it's really important that you can empower these individual teams so they can see what they need to see for their role. But at a higher level, the director might only want to see the bird's eye view. They might only want to see it from 30,000 foot and not at the minutiae of the detail. But it's really important that you can drill down from that top level, right down to where the actual issues or where things are or are not working for your business. So obviously I've gone through these questions here and I've talked about how we're going to identify information, where we're going to start. But it's really important, again, to not try and boil the ocean here. Start with version 1, get something that's meaningful to your business, and then you can move on to looking at the tools that you use within your business. Now, this point 1 is called data source tools. And this really is, well, where are we getting that information from? Do we need to go and get some new tools so that we can report on information correctly? And it's so critical to have the right foundational tools that you can build on top of. For example, what we find when we work with a lot of businesses is they've got isolated data. We've got isolated pockets of data in the business. And this would be where you've had an issue, so you've gone and got a tool, and that solved that problem for you straight away, and that's brilliant. Then you've gone and got another tool, and then Jess is really good at spreadsheets, so she's got a master spreadsheet. And this just happens organically over time. So at this point, we really want to centralize that information and make sure you've got the right foundational tools to build on top of. And these might look something like a really good CRM, which has the ability to do email marketing, or integrates with an email marketing tool and website tracking. Because there's a clear picture between the CRM, the email marketing, and website activity that you want to see that data joined together. It's great seeing it, but without it being joined together, you're missing parts of the story. And a lot of these platforms have the ability to do tracking and scoring based on activity. So if we think about if someone goes to a certain page on my website, I want to give them 50 points. Let's say it was a pricing page. Let's say if you go to the contact us page, that's only 20 points. And if they go to a blog, that's 10 points. And now you've got a way to automatically start scoring people who you know in your business as potential prospects automatically. So the foundational aspect of this is so key. After we've got the right set of tools, and this could be project management tools, CRMs, email marketing, we want to make sure that the tools themselves actually support the team in doing what they need to do. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you've got a CRM, do you have all the right fields? So are you capturing, in Kate's case, around commercial versus domestic? You need to understand if those sales are upsells, cross sells, and if you can facilitate the tool to capture that information and actually encourage the good behavior from the team. Because many people, when things are difficult, they don't get done. But if the tool makes it easy for someone to track the value of the opportunity, to track the geographical region, or industry, you can encourage that through something called validation, where they can't move to the next stage without completing that bit of information. You're then making it easy for the team to do their jobs, and you're going to help systemize the entire process from the cradle to the grave. And this doesn't have to stop in the CRM. It can actually be done all the way through project management tools, delivery tools, and your finance tools to make everything easy all the way across the spectrum of your business. So we've got our CRMs, we've got our project management tools now, we've got some way to track our finances, that's great. So now we need to start thinking about how we make this visual and how we select a tool that can build dashboards and automatically pull in this information for you. So there's lots of different tools in the market today. And to name but a few, we've got Zoho Analytics, Power BI, we've got Databox or Clipfolio. These are some of the common ones you'll see in the market, but there's loads of them out there. And actually, when it comes to selecting products for a business, one of the things that we do is we always start at the detail. What are the requirements? What do you really need? And then we work backwards from that to pick the most appropriate tool for them. We're never going to recommend a single tool for every business that we work with. And once we've selected what we feel is the right product for the business, the next thing is, what do you do? Well, you can connect it to your most common data sources. So your CRM, your finance packages, your project management tools. And most of these tools, if you're using some of the main branded ones, will automatically pull the information in for you, which then takes away a big chunk of the pain. So at this point, we've connected some dashboards, we've built them out, and then we can start using them to tell stories about what's going on in our business. And we can amalgamate data from many different sources, whether it's our social media, whether it's our sales, but it's understanding the relationship of the flow of information from the marketing through sales and then out into delivery and into finance. That entire journey is crucially important for any business to understand where they can make improvements. And really, it should be easy, right? So as you can see on the boards behind me, we've got gauges, we've got line charts, we've got bits of information that help display that information. Now, one thing that we always encourage is to build in filters and make them dynamic, because it's great having a single dashboard, but it's not great if you then have to build a new one each time you have a slightly different query. So the ones you'll see at the very top have the ability to change the date. You can actually change some of the filters on it. So by doing that, you're also empowering your team to be able to analyze information without any real technical know-how. It's just a couple of clicks of a button, and then they can see a different set of data. So we've got some dashboards that look great. Now, there are some challenges that you will face, and that would be things like tools that don't have the ability to naturally integrate with dashboarding tools. And that can be a bit of a sad moment when you realize not everything will plug in, but it's not to worry. There's lots of different ways that you can extract information out of modern tooling and push them into data boards. So previously, what I've spoken about is about data being pulled in. Now I'm going to be talking about how we push data in. And where that's really powerful is actually now you can get data from any data source. If there's a spreadsheet export somewhere, that can be picked up and pushed in. If there's more of an offline tool like Sage, some of the older versions of Sage, you can actually communicate to Sage and then push the data in. And we would commonly use tools like Zapier, Integromat, or Make.com, which are basically what we call an integration layer, which can basically handle the logic between one application. It can read one application and then send it to the next application. So now we've managed to plug the gap between those challenging platforms that you use and your automated dashboards. Now at this point, you've got some really nice, beautiful dashboards for all of the team members. For the CEO, the director, they can see everything that's going on in the business. Your individual teams also have their own dashboards because now they're empowered to see what's going on. By being able to see how well they're doing, also helps them have instant feedback to performance. And this removes the ambiguity of quarterly reviews, monthly reviews, annual reviews completely, because it's in the palm of their hands to know how well they are doing, which is great. But then how can we use this information to change how we operate? Well, you can introduce alerting. And some of the alerting there obviously would be things like we've hit a goal or we've not hit a goal. But how can you go one better than that? Well, you could do forecasted alerts. And this would be, let's say for a month, your goal is £20,000 and you're 70% of the way through the month and you're not forecast-wise going to hit that goal. Now you can be notified about it in advance, enabling you to be proactive and prevent a problem from happening or make small corrective action in the business before it's too late. Too often in businesses, we look back on a quarter and a year and then question, oh, what happened? Rather than in the moment, have the ability to make small micro adjustments that that can actually have a cumulative effect over a period of time. Now, we've got normal alerts, we've got forecasted alerts. We could also do data anomaly alerting. And this is really powerful from something unusual has happened in the business from its baseline. So if you think that it normally operates like this and there's a drop one day. Now, that's really important to understand what's causing that. Because if every Tuesday is your busiest day and then one week it's not, it's important to understand if there's something happening in the business. There could be a problem with the website. There could be a problem with your phones. There might be an IT issue that you're unaware of, but actually is affecting the bottom line. Now, at this point, we've got data dashboards. We're integrated with all your existing platforms, your CRMs, your project management tools, your finance platforms, and all of your marketing tools. And the information is now coming to you and not you fishing for that information. So how can we then improve on this? Well, the next thing that we recommend to do is you change the way in which that you operate when you think about data. We don't want it to be a set and a forget scenario where basically we don't want it to be a set and forget scenario where you set all this up and you walk away and you think, well, that's job done. It's important to introduce some business practices such as regular reviews, bi-weekly, having stakeholder reviews, having the people who asked for that information to confirm if they don't want anything changed. Because you might want to zoom in on some really vital or smaller bits of information to tell a slightly different story. Now, this is a forever moving process, so your business should support this process. This is the third step until we go back to the beginning and we plan again and make some adjustments. Point in case with this, recently, as of last week actually, we were tracking our sales cycle. We're trying to reduce the sales cycle. That was a big focus for us. And actually, we realized after a while of watching it, it's not actually that beneficial because there's so many things out of our hands. So instead, we're improving the quality of the journey and the touch points within the process. And we want to increase those. Because there might be a solid reason. If we're wanting an IT support contract that doesn't expire for another year, it's going to sit there for a year and it's going to throw all the numbers out. But that's fine, because we've got a next step, and that's what's important to us. And being able to have all this information, being able to review it, ultimately enables you to understand the heartbeat of your business. And in its simplest form, business is just logic and numbers. And if something's working well, you continue doing it. And if it's not working, you stop or you change it. And if there's one bit of advice you can take from us today, please stop viewing data in isolation. Start joining the dots together, getting rid of those spreadsheets, and making data-driven decisions. Thank you all very much for listening.